Hi friends, and welcome back to a brand new episode of Queer. This time we are back with an organization feature. On this week's episode of Queer, Rowan talks to us about the LBQT organization she started called She Barbados. She stands for Sexuality, Health, and Empowerment. It is an intersectional feminist and LBQT organization here. We learn how she started, their mission, the projects they're working on, and what the organization provides to the community. Now, if you've missed Rowan's episode last week, I'm telling you, you do not want to miss her story. I know I say it every week, but I cannot emphasize more. Go back and watch. It is phenomenal. So go back. Trust me, go back. Please go back. Watch it. Watch it. Like, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget, we launched our podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, where you can watch the whole unedited story. We also launched our Patreon page, and for us just as little as $3 a month, you can help support the journey of queer if you believe in us. Which I know you do. Anyways, let's learn about She Barbados.
Sexuality, health, empowerment.
How did you get to the space of wanting to start this organization?
Before I started I was involved in LGBT advocacy and activism, as well as just general human rights activism, feminist activism, and it seemed like in many ways these spaces and movements organized separately, even though they collided in so many different ways. And I think about queer women and transgender people and the ways in which their identities really just sit at the crossroad of those two or more than two different sets of movements. When I took a look at the way in which resources were being allocated, it was really focused on HIV and cis gay men's issues. As a queer woman, I'm aware of a lot of the issues that queer women face. So for example, corrective rape being one of them. That's something that's quite prevalent in our community, but it's not really spoken about, you know. Domestic violence between women, STIs being transmitted between women, the fact that trans men need pap smears and nobody ever really says anything. Mammograms, you know, just access to like different sexual and reproductive health rights and resources. The fact that trans men menstruate and, you know, that could obviously like contribute to a lot of dysphoria and like people who experience period poverty but are also trans. Just a myriad of different issues that LBQT people face in particular that weren't really being spoken about. There was just like the misconception that for some reason that lesbians have it easier than gay men because, you know, the discrimination is not as bad, but it's just different.
It's true. You know, that's one big topic is always people say lesbians have it easier than gay people in Barbados. You know?
Yeah, and that's not true. I remember in 2015 or 16, a lesbian was raped and the Nation published it in the gossip column and laughed at it and said she got a taste of male medicine. So that just shows the ways in which, our culture just thinks that the issues that lesbians and queer women face are just a joke. Pretty much. It was a lot of different factors that drove me to start this organization, and also thinking about the way in which queer women and trans people have always been at the front line of this movement, always been at the front line of activism, always put in a new work. Pride was started by Black and trans people of color. Even the first Pride March, which was a commemoration of the Stonewall riots, was started by a bisexual woman named Brenda. But nobody talks about Brenda. You know, people don't talk about Marsha P. Johnson as much as they should, or as much as they do about people like, you know, Harvey Milk. And those are obviously like Global North examples, but it's similar down here. For a long time, the biggest association with our movement was HIV, AIDS, gay men. And I'm like, we're so much more than this, you know? We're also more than the way in which we have sex. You know, like starting She was a way to create a space for just visibility of the issues that our community faces that don't really get spoken about. Also educating community about, in particular, their sexual and reproductive health, and also doing research, because I think a big part of the issue and a big part of why there is like ignorance around the issues that queer women and trans people face is because there's a lack of data and a lack of like empirical evidence to support some of these claims. So yeah, that's been like a three-pronged approach to SHE: providing services, advocacy, and research.
So what is some of the main things that projects you have on the go right now?
Ooh, we do so much. So during the pandemic, we actually have been partnering with Equals and Butterfly to provide care packages for people in our community, LGBT people who are already vulnerable when it comes
Absolutely.
to income. And people are just really struggling, to put it plainly. So many people don't have even the resources just to buy tampons and pads and just to get through one menstrual cycle. So that's something that has really been a focus for us. Things that they need to be able to live a life with dignity. People shouldn't be like forced to, scrounge around for basic human resources. So we do what we can. We've also provided support to people in St. Vincent who were affected by the pandemic, the volcanic ash.
I remember it.
And it's a community initiative too, because we collect donations from general public. I think community needs to show up for each other. Something that we also just, that we're wrapping up now is called LGBT is Not a Blood Type. That was a research and advocacy project focused on the perception that LGBT people can't donate blood in Barbados. And it's a perception, and it exists in practice too in some ways, because sometimes the people who are taking the blood donation don't allow LGBT people to donate blood. So we did a research project which was really just gathering the experiences of some LGBT people in Barbados. Also the perceptions of general public around what people think when it comes to donation. And we found that 39% of people in Barbados believe that there's a law prohibiting people from donating blood, and that law doesn't exist. There's no law, but it's just at the discretion of the healthcare provider, which is why we need legislation, non-discrimination legislation in particular, to mandate and regulate these things when people are accessing services.
But that's a huge area in Barbados that's widely discriminated against LGBTQ people, correct?
Yeah.
Healthcare.
Yeah, there's been progress, but it needs to be more standardized for sure. Because, people shouldn't have to identify like particular LGBT friendly healthcare workers. It should be that case, across the board. We have worked with the Ministry of Health, and they have been really, really great in partnering with us. In particular, we have a clinic. We have a clinic that we have run for the past year with Equals, but moving forward, we're also going to be working with the Barbados Family Planning Association. And it's a free clinic where we provide access to, in particular, like sexual and reproductive health services to people in our community to get pap smears, general checkouts, access to testing, because research has actually shown that lesbians and queer women get checkups less, and are more susceptible or disproportionately affected by certain types of cancers and stuff because they just access these resources less. Providing people with safe access to these resources is really critical for us. And we did a research project that was part of a wider Caribbean research project that also showed that people don't access these resources because, one, they don't have the money, and then when they go to access these resources at public healthcare, they don't feel safe. So really building safe and accessible spaces for people to get the stuff they need.
Do you guys focus on mental health there too?
Yes. So in the past, we worked with Equals, who was providing the access to a psychotherapist. But moving forward, we'll be partnering with BFPA, and that will be part of the services that we provide. So access to a counselor.
So important.
Something else that's an important service that we are working on providing is access to gender affirming care for people who want to undergo hormone replacement therapy, because I think a lot of trans people don't realize that that's available to them in Barbados, but it is. So we work with physicians through the Ministry of Health who see trans patients and advise them on how they can access hormones safely, and go through their transition process.
Yeah, that is so important. And they need a lot of support too during those times. So I think that's so important. What does the future look like for SHE?
Well, something that is really important to me and to the organization is building a movement that's sustainable. Because I think something that activism deals with is, one, being dependent on donor funding and not really tapping into like community resources, but also movements existing in one person, like all the knowledge lives in one person becomes the face of an organization, one person becomes the face of a movement, and then when that person is burnt out or they move on, the organization dismantles, or the movement sort of dismantles, and then you have to start from the top and do all the work over again.
Absolutely.
So in trying to address this, we are actually kicking off the LGBTQ leadership project. And we're going to be having like a retreat for queer women and transgender non-binary persons in Barbados who want to be involved in activism, but don't really know where to start. You know, like I've had the immense privilege of being able to participate in a lot of international spaces, a lot of like UN spaces, conferences. You get this wealth of information and knowledge, and it's been great to be able to use that information and knowledge to build an organization like She, to get resources, to have a clinic and stuff like that. But other people also deserve access to this information.
Absolutely.
Particularly people who don't have the ability to go to a conference or, you know. So these Leadership Academy retreats will really be focusing on redistributing some of this information back into the community so that they too, in turn, can go make a change in their communities and develop their own advocacy, and so that the movement lives on beyond just like one person doing work.
I think it's so important because, you know, first of all, activism can be quite intimidating when you don't know how to get involved. And just like creating that space where you're like, hey, we want to offer you this, like a retreat where you can come and you can get involved in any way or form you want. Take whatever you want from this, you know?
Yeah.
I think that's so important. And second of all, you know, just like creating a space where people are going to go back out to the world with so much knowledge that you all at She have collected, is going to create a bigger scale movement in Barbados, you know, by them going back into their communities and educating. So I think fabulous idea.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, because you want knowledge to spread like wildfire, you know. And there's only so much reach that you can have too, because we are an organization, and we try to reach people as much as we can through social media, digital media and stuff, but we can't reach everybody on the island. There are people who live in rural communities, people who would be afraid to approach an organization because of fear of stigmatization. And it makes it a little bit easier if we spread knowledge to people and then they spread knowledge to their peers, and so on and so on and so on. Yeah.
Absolutely. Wow. Amazing.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this. I think it's going to be great.
I think it's going to be good too.
Yes.
It's a nice step for just like continuing on the legacy of She, you know, and seeing what new ideas people bring into the organization also.
Yeah, sure.
Again, I just want to say a massive thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming on here and sharing so much wisdom with us. And I think we have a lot to learn from this interview. So I just want to say thank you and keep doing the amazing work that you're doing. And I can't wait to see Barbados transform.
Yes. We're on our way. We're on our way. And happy Pride.
Happy Pride.
My Pride nails. I'm like, look at my nails.
Just focus on the nails, please. Zoom in. Thank you, Rowan, for coming on here and teaching us about She Barbados. The organization has so much to offer, so please check them on social. And if you want to get involved with She, all of the links are below in the description. And friends, let's continue to educate ourselves and become better allies. Thank you again, Rowan, and I'll see you next week for a brand new episode. Ciao for now.